At this point, I'll take a few minutes to introduce City Speaks to those who are new. So, City Speaks is a young startup founded in 2019 in the field of urban research and civic engagement. We are driven by the desire of bridging the asymmetry in information pertaining to small cities in India. We rest a firm conviction in governance that is resilient, um, planning that is participatory, and inclusive urban spaces. With our primary focus on small cities in India, through our research, we aim to bring about contextually embedded policies that elicit participative planning, resilient governance, and inclusive and sustainable cities. So, to begin with, I would like to request everybody in the audience to switch off their microphones and to keep your videos off. Only the co-hosts and ma'am will be keeping their videos on. The topic of discussion today, as you all know, is the status of small cities post the COVID shock. So, to give us a small perspective into the future, we welcome Dr. Mahalaya Chatterjee to address us. We would like to thank you, ma'am, for readily accepting our invitation and being a staunch supporter of our venture. Our speaker for today is a professor at Calcutta University, and she's also served as the director at the Center for Urban and Economic Studies. As is customary, we would really love to tell you a lot more about ma'am's achievements and endeavors, but speaking of those briefly would be an understatement of her achievements. So we shall leave that for you in the chat section. Once again, please keep your microphones silent throughout, and we hand it over to ma'am. Ma'am, you may begin.
Am I audible and visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon to everybody, and my best wishes to City Speak for arranging such a webinar within this second phase of lockdown. And I am really impressed by your startup, which wants to talk about or which wants to be a mouthpiece for small cities and towns in India. Now, for India, the small cities or towns are neglected from the very beginning. Now, to start with, let me start with, before going into small cities and towns, let me start with a bit little about India's urbanization so that we will be able to understand the position of small cities and the role of small cities and why we need to give importance to small cities and everything. So, as you all know that India, historically speaking, India is a country which started its urbanization from the very first known fact of history. We talk about Indus Valley civilization, and whatever we got by excavation in those areas are the remnants of cities. And these cities surely astounds us because everybody know about their rectangular grid pattern, their planning, and some of the things which were really we like to call as urban amenities or facilities. Everybody has seen the picture of the big bath of Mohenjo-daro. Mohenjo-daro, and that is a public space, that is a urban public amenity. And we are really surprised at that age how can a civilization could build cities like that. And also if you see another picture we generally look at at the history books is the so-called grain storage at Harappa. That is also a and so-called urban amenity, and that speaks a lot about what we call today rural-urban interaction, because agriculture was outside the city, whatever be the form of the city, the grains came from there, the surplus grain came from there, and that was stored in that granary. So we belong to a country which started its historical journey with cities, but somehow we don't want to talk about that. We are more concerned about the pastoral and the agricultural economy that followed in the Aryan period and others. And of course, there are cities throughout our history which are still there, like Varanasi and Ujjaini and so and so. But because of many reasons, we forgot about that urban part or urban planning. And now, if you look at our book, oldest book on uh, administration and whatever it is, that is Kautilya's Arthashastra, you will find that there also there are descriptions about the layout of the city, and you'll be surprised to know there are something. They said that the people who lived on the dairy farming and something like that, they would live in the boundary of the city so that they can have the pastoral lands at one hand and the market within the city in other hand. Such was the astounding knowledge of our forefathers. But of course, we forgot about that, and what we call urbanization today came with our colonial rulers, with the so-called colonial period. So what we inherited in the independent India was the colonial pattern of urbanization, which was grossly skewed and also very, very, very uneven, given the big country, the large country, the diversity and others. The colonial rulers were, as you know, were interested uh, in getting the raw material from this country and sending it to their own country, and the main reason was feeding the mills of Manchester and others. So for them, the port cities were very important. So thus came in the colonial period the growth and development of the three main port cities of the country, that is Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay, and uh, and till now, these are the three main metropolis of the country. To add with that, we got Delhi, which got the status of capital in 1911, and then Delhi grew subsequently. But our structure, our urbanization structure was based on these three metropolitan cities. They were not, of course, called metropolitan cities in those days, but uh, the whole economy was gathered or focused to these three metropolitan cities. Whatever little phase of industrialization we had at the colonial period, mainly its processing and other type of industries which supported these processing industries. That is, we had jute mills in and around Calcutta, and cotton mills in and around Mumbai. So it was the chemicals, engineering, everything uh, was to support these main industries. And of course, there are another sort of towns which grew up in the colonial period, which were again so-called agro-based or primary-based. Those were the plantation towns, wherever they got the favorable weather and landform. They cultivated tea, they cultivated coffee, and so that's grew the North Bengal plantations in Assam, and in South India, in parts of today's Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and so and so. So, the urbanization pattern we derived from the colonial period was basically based on these three metropolitan cities. Our transport routes, mainly the at that time, what we inherited in the pre-colonial period was basically either land routes or water routes, and in the colonial period we had the railway lines, and as you see that railways also converged in the big cities. They are more connected with the big cities compared to the hinterland. So that what we inherited is a sort of primate based uh, urbanization type of thing. uh, Urbanization was very, very low. In 1901, only 10% of total population lived in urban areas in an undivided India. And in the first census after uh, independence, that is in 1951, it was about 17%. And people say that the last 2% was the addition because of post-partition migration, which the migrant population of the displaced population from So 17%. Just to give you an idea that what is urban, now it is very difficult to define what is urban, because each and every country of the world has their own definition of urban, and it is mostly been dependent on two criteria. First is the governance criteria, and second is the so-called demographic criteria, demographic occupational criteria. Now, India is one of the 5 countries of the world which follows both of them. In India, if you don't know, there are 2 types of urban areas. Firstly, the statutory urban areas. The statutory urban areas imply that uh, if uh, if any area, any settlement which has a form of local governance, which takes care of the amenities and facilities, be it a municipal corporation in bigger towns, municipality in smaller towns, and cantonment board, notified area, whatever it is, if there is any form of governance, uh, it will be treated as an urban area, and these urban areas are called statutory urban areas. But the second type of urban areas, and they are identified by the census authority in every census. In every census, you know, our census takes place in every 10 years. So in every census, the census authority takes the pain of identifying new urban areas, and they do it with three criteria, and these towns are called census towns as they are identified by the census authority. And these towns have a population of more than 5,000, then a population density, that is population persons per square kilometer, is 400, that is 400 persons per square kilometer is the second. And the third and the most important is, that is 75% of uh, total male working population uh, are engaged in non-primary, or to be very to speak, non-agricultural activities. Now, if any settlement fulfills these three criteria, that is treated as a town by the census authority. But that is a peculiar situation, because in our country we have from the administrative setup, we have a binary type of thing, because it is either urban or rural, or it is not only in case of administration but also government projects and everything, either it is meant for rural area or for urban area. These census towns from administrative point of view still belong to the rural area. But these criteria are set by the census authority, and they identify so-called census towns by this criteria. And there was a third one, which was called the discretionary criteria. Now, this was also developed by the so-called census authority because of a particular reason. This discretionary criteria came up in 1961 census. As you all know, that our second plan, which started in second 5-year plan, which started in 1956, it had a push for industrialization. And at the time of preparation for this 1961 census, it was found that the new townships which were being developed for industries, like you all know about the steel townships which came up with the second 5-year plan, like Durgapur, Bhilai, etc., or the new educational institutions which got townships like IITs and others, all of them were in making. Now, these places under construction or under thing are quite different from the surrounding rural area, but they did not fulfill the criteria I talked about before. So the census authority was given the power. As you know, the census is also a hierarchical thing in our country. The main census directorate is in Delhi, but each state has its own census directorate. The director of census operations was given the power to identify this this type of townships and making or anything as urban by their discretionary power. Now, this criteria was carried on in 1961, 71, 81, and 91 census. But after that, this was abolished. This was abolished because, as you can understand, that from 91 we started to follow a different path in which the role of the government was much more restricted. It was a facilitator rather than its all endeavoring role during the plan periods. So government was no more building big townships or anything. So this criteria was abolished. So today, from 2001 census followed by 2011 census, we have either statutory towns or these census towns. Now, coming to the size of the towns, this is a big country, very big country, very large country, and we have a large number of towns. To be very specific, we have about more than 700,000 towns all over the country, spread over the whole country, and they are of different sizes. In no way you can compare Mumbai or Delhi with a town called Katihar because of this hierarchy in sizes. Now, this is very common. This is very common because, of course, you cannot have all big towns or small towns. There should be a hierarchy of towns. But in India, again, the Census Authority has divided the number of towns in 6 categories. 6 categories to start with. It starts with the lowest rung, that is the towns with less than 5,000 population. Then followed, they are called class 6 towns. Then from 5,000 to 10,000, class 5 towns. Then 10,000 to 20,000, it's class 4 towns. 20 to 50, class 3, and 50 to 1 lakh, class 2, and the highest one is the cities with population more than 1 lakh. Now, given our type of urban growth which we had in the post-independence period, we are a so-called top-heavy country with top-heavy urbanization. Because though we have these 6 categories of towns and cities, if you look either by the number of urban settlements belonging to each class or the population living in this class, you will find a very skewed distribution, very, very, very skewed distribution, and which is not our inheritance. It is what we have done in the post-independence period. Now, in 1901, there were about 21% people of urban population lived in class 1 towns. Now, it increased gradually, and the increase was much more faster in the post-independence period. So now we have about 60% of our population living in class 1 cities. So, and this is unique in many sense, because no other country of comparable, we have only one country which can be compared in population, that is China. But if you consider the geographical size and others, you will see no country has so many or so big a portion of urban population living in class 1 towns. Class 1 towns. So now I am gradually coming to the focus of today's webinar, that why we have to pay attention to the smaller towns and cities. Now, of course, we had 3 big cities or 3 or 4 big cities in 1951, but now we are followed by, in our whole growth process in the post-independence period, now we have so many class 1 cities, and our population is concentrated there. Not only class 1 cities themselves, but we also have a big distribution of urban agglomerations. Urban agglomerations means when you have contiguous urban areas spread over a geographical area. Spread over a geographical area. Now we have as much as 120 urban agglomerations all over the country. This may be due to physical space, because the highest number of urban agglomerations are in a small strip of land, which we denote as the state of Kerala, or it may be just because of it, they have grown contiguously, like Kolkata urban agglomeration, or Mumbai, or Delhi, or Hyderabad, or Chennai, or so and so, where smaller cities and towns are physically contiguous to bigger cities and towns. Now, I think I have conveyed to you that that in India urbanization is skewed. That is because of the level of urbanization in India, that is the percentage of population living in urban areas in India is very, very low if you consider the percentage. If you consider the percentage, as I said, that we have started with 17% in 1951. Now, by 2001, it has only grown to 28%. 28%, that is, as far as percentage is concerned, it has not even doubled in 50 years. 50 years, it is, by any chance, it is very, very small if you consider the percentage, because in most of the developed countries of the world, the percentage urban is what we call the urbanized industrialized countries, is when they have more than 70% or 75% of the population living in urban areas. But in India, it was only 28% in 2001. Now in 2011, two things happened, and somehow it was hailed as that the urban age has arrived in India or something like that. Why? That is mainly because of two reasons. Because for the first time in the post-independence period, the growth rate of urban population surpassed that of the rural. And secondly, this was the census authority identified as about 2,500 plus new census towns in 2011. Now, this 2,500, this number is quite important, because it took 100 years to have new 2,500 census towns. From 1900 to 2001, we got new about 2,500 census towns, but within 10 years, we got another new 2,500 census towns. So when the first results of 2011 census was coming, it was something held as the urban age has arrived, or something like that. But again, there are lots of debate about this. A veteran like Professor Amitabh Kundu has said that there is a method in madness, because this 30% urbanization was not matching with India shining or anything, so that there was pressure on the census authority to identify more and more census towns. But later it was seen that it's not that the census authority is not in a position to receive such a criticism. Why? That is because if you look at the urbanization pattern of the India, it is quite varied. Just now, the state with highest level of urbanization, or by 2011 census, we are almost heading another census. So by 2011 census, Tamil Nadu was the state which has the highest level of urbanization. It was about 46%. But on the other part, among the bigger states, the lowest level of urbanization was in Himachal Pradesh, and it was only 11%. So within the bigger states, the range of urbanization was between 11% and 46%. And for the smaller states, it's quite varied, because among the smaller states, we have city states like Delhi, Pondicherry, and Goa, which are meant to be urban. And of course, Delhi and Pondicherry has urbanization level more than 90%. In Goa, it's about 70%. And the smaller states of northeastern India like Mizoram, Manipur, they also have urbanization level of about 40 to 50% in some cases. Now I'm not going into the details of the state level of urbanization, but just to remind you that this level of urbanization, this varied level of urbanization is not only within the states, but also in the states. Also in the states, within a state like Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu, we have districts. If we go into the districts, we will see there will be huge variation in urbanization, level of urbanization. Sometimes it's about 60% more than the state average, and sometimes it is lower than uh, sometimes it is it all right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes, okay, sometimes it is less than it does not even cross the single digit. So it varies all over the country, and if you look at compare between 2001 and 2011 census, you will see there is no change in the basic pattern of urbanization. The states which were urbanized, they increased their level of urbanization. Which were with low level of urbanization, they're remaining in the low level of urbanization. Of course, the absolute value was increasing. And given our huge population, our large population, whatever be the percentage, the absolute uh, population in urban areas is quite high. Sometimes it is higher than the total population of any small European country. Now we are standing in such a situation. We are having a top-heavy urbanization. Our urbanization is metro-based. We are in our list of metropolitan cities. We are continuously adding more cities and towns. As we said, we started with 4: Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, and Chennai. Now we have added Hyderabad and Bangalore, and many more are in the list. So here comes the question of smaller cities and towns. Now I am not going into the much details, but let me take up the cities and towns belonging to class 2 and class 3. Now, what are the importance of this cities and towns in an urban hierarchy? In an urban hierarchy, what role they can play and what can be their special role in the so-called post-COVID situation? Now, any urban area is not a closed thing. It's not a closed entity. It's not, though we talk about walled city historically, but now urban areas are not walled. They are not closed at all. An urban area thrives and grows by its interaction with its hinterland, with the cities and towns, towns and rural areas around it. And we can talk about different types of linkages and flows an urban area has with hinterland. Now, generally speaking, we talk about 3 types of flows, 3 or 4 types of flows. Firstly, as you all know, and which has become very important, in fact, we have become aware of the whole thing, that is the flow of labor. The flow of labor, which we call in development literature, or which we know in development literature as migration. Now, this is very a common thing in development literature, in growth literature, that labor is mobile. Labor will move because of better payment, because of better working conditions, or rather sometimes in our country like ours, just for survival. Just to remind you that we started to follow this when we started to follow this LPG program, that is the liberalization, privatization and globalization. The government took off many of the things it was doing before, and one of the hardest hit area was the agriculture. Now the government withdrew many of the many of the subsidies, etc., from the agricultural sector. So the agricultural sector, in a sense, become non-remunerative. It is all over India, and we are seeing an exodus from the agricultural sector to the non-agricultural sector. Now, if this non-agricultural or the non-farm sector is not found in the villages, then the surplus revenue from agriculture, and also agriculture has passed through a period of mechanization, so that the requirement for agricultural labor, which was there before mechanization, was also reduced. So this surplus labor had to go to the cities and towns for their livelihood. So this is what is famously known as rural-urban migration. But in India, but uh, uh, as elsewhere, also in India, we have three other types of migration. In India, we have different types of urban migration, like not only rural, but also urban-rural. When an educated youth from a city gets a job in the rural area, in an educational institution, or in a health service sector, he has this may be termed as urban rural migration. But also there is urban migration, that is, I am born in a city, but I get a job in another city, that is urban migration. And also we have what is called rural migration. Now this rural migration is hidden, but it is very much in India. Everybody know that it is especially in the harvesting season, in the agricultural season, there is seasonal migration of rural workers to other places for harvesting and other for getting job in the harvesting or anything. Anyway, but this flow is there, the flow of labor. Then there is flow of capital. Now this flow of capital, that may be financial, that may be non-financial, Now, at one time, we used to use this rural-urban dichotomy to almost parallelly as the industry-agriculture dichotomy. So it was thought that the industries were in the urban areas. So when the machineries, etc., manufactured in urban area went to rural area, that was the flow of non-financial capital, and also flow of financial capital through banks and other financial institutions. Then there is flow of raw material. The raw materials from agricultural sector like jute and cotton went to the city-based industries as raw materials, and also urban raw materials sometimes went to rural sectors. And also there is flow of finished products from both ways. Now this rural-urban relationship sometimes usually that depends on whether this is good or bad, depends on what is called the rural-urban terms of trade. That is, at what price rural products are brought in the urban areas, or the urban products are brought in the rural areas. Now, if it is continuously urban areas are selling goods to the rural areas, goods and raw materials in the rural areas at a higher price, then of course the terms of trade is against rural areas. And if it is continuously so, then it is not a synergic type of growth, but rather an exploitative type of growth. But I am not going into rural-urban relationship just now. Let me concentrate on the urban areas. Now, the smaller cities and towns, they have a dual role to play as far as flows are concerned. Now, as I have said, that there are urban agglomerations, and there are also areas which doesn't belong to or urban centers which does not belong to agglomeration. So within urban agglomeration, the smaller cities and towns are more linked with the mother city, the metro city, and they have a synergic type of relationship, because most of the financial things, the educational institutions, the technical institutions, etc., which supplies manpower to the smaller towns and cities, come from the bigger city. But most of the smaller cities or towns which are isolated, they are more linked with the rural areas. They are much more linked with the rural areas, and they act as a focal point of the transferring of goods and services within the cities and towns. Cities and towns, they play a very, very, very crucial role. Crucial role, and that is their importance. That is their importance. And this was, as I was saying, in the pre-independence period, our urbanization pattern was not so top heavy. We had smaller market towns and others in which the rural produce gathered and then distributed. But now we have a different type of distribution system. So these cities and towns almost lost their importance. Now let me come to the issue of that. What can the smaller cities and towns do? Now, these smaller cities and towns, what they can do will depend on what are their strengths and what are the strengths. Now, of course, the main strength is that they have a population more than the so-called big cities and towns. Big cities and towns, the density is lower. There is land availability, but whatever spread of education we had in our post-independence period, they have a store of, or their pool of educated and workers. But and also because of less congestion, less pollution, they are less polluted. They are better places to live in. So that is their strength. But what are their weaknesses? The main weakness is, of course, infrastructural and governance. As our whole focus was on bigger cities and metro cities, we sort of neglected infrastructural development in smaller cities and towns, and also the governance. Now, before going into the details, let me talk a bit about the urban governance system in our country. Now, our definition of urban incorporates the presence of an urban local body. Or the presence of an urban local body designates a place as urban. But peculiarly enough, when our constitution was written, there was no reference to this urban local bodies, or in that sense, any type of local bodies. This is something very, very, very peculiar. We had two, in a federal country like ours, we have two tiers of government, the central government and the state governments. But we just forgot about the third tier. But as you know, the local government movement started in the colonial period in the 1880s. Lord Ripon will be remembered as the pioneer of our local governance. Now, in fact, this local governments, especially in urban areas, as they were partially elected, and others, you will see most of our leaders of our independent movement and others, they were also functionaries of the local governments, and that helped our independence movement to a lot. But somehow we forgot the whole thing while writing our constitution. So it took long years. In 1992, that is almost 45 years after our independence, we could give a constitutional status to the local governments. So the 73rd constitutional amendment was meant for rural local bodies, panchayats, and the 74th amendment was meant for the urban areas. So in the period in between, we just forgot about these local governments, and they were almost neglected. The urban development was carried out by the urban development authorities. You all know about Delhi Development Authority or beyond Mumbai Regional Development Authority or Visakhapatnam Urban Development Authority and so and so. They were mainly uh, given the responsibility of urban planning, urban development, and there was no scope for the urban governance. The local urban bodies were continuously neglected. There was no bit of democratization or the so-called participatory democracy, participatory planning. Nothing was there in this 35 years. Some of the states like West Bengal, in their own endeavor, within the given constitutional, they strengthened their urban and rural local bodies. But in 92, after the 74th constitutional amendment, urban governance by the urban local body or rural government by the rural local body was given a constitutional status. But even after 25 years, we can see that urban governance is not that whatever was expected of the 74th amendment has not been fulfilled. Till now. The most important urban development program we had, though it was called a renewal mission, was the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, in which in the governance or in the participation of the people in the governance or planning or anything. So even with the formation of the State Finance Commission and others, these smaller towns, cities and towns, they lack in proper finance and of course infrastructure. In infrastructure. So that is another weakness. That is, as far as governance, finance and infrastructure is considered, these smaller cities and towns, they are in a difficult position. Another point which is most important, if you go to any smaller city or town, you will see there is no public transport. I am not saying that the condition of public transport is very convenient or very good in bigger cities and towns, but they are almost absent in the smaller cities and towns. Smaller cities and towns is either you have your private transport, or you have to depend on the so-called the paratransit things like the auto rickshaws, rickshaws, etc. They cater to your transportation system in smaller cities and towns. There is no organized public transport, and it is and that is another difficulty. And one with our experience from lockdown, one can say that is a good thing because it generates less pollution, but that is surely a problem for the lower rung of the society, because they have to spend a lot on the so-called paratransit system or whatever it is. So this is another weakness. So governance, less of infrastructure, less of no organized public transport, and financial condition. These are the things. Next, let me come to the opportunities. That is, as for the opportunities is concerned, the first is, of course, as I have talked about, it is the linkage with the surrounding areas. Surrounding areas, bigger cities are not that way linked to the surrounding rural areas, which these small towns have this linkage. So this can be treated as an advantage which can be utilized later. This smaller cities and towns can become the processing centers for the agricultural produce. Most of our agricultural produce, especially the orchard products, the fruits and other things, then if I diversify the flowers and others, they rot, they perish, or dairy products, most of them they perish because of less storage facilities, processing facilities, and also because of absence of transport, their time to reach the market. So these smaller cities and towns, they can grab the opportunity. They can grab the opportunity in that case, and they can become focal points of agro-based and agro-processing industries. And not only agro, but they can also thrive on the local raw materials and so that they can build upon an economy of their own. The local raw materials from the surroundings of different times can be used up in setting up manufacturing centers. And as you all know, India also lacks in one of the things which should have come with development, with economic growth. That is the participation of women in the economy. We have a very, very low female work participation rate, and it is also it is lower in the smaller cities and towns. It is low in the urban areas compared to the rural areas, and it is also low in the smaller cities and towns. Now, this can be another place of advantage where we have an unused human resource which can be utilized. Now, one of the studies has shown that most of the women, even having the education and the skill, cannot work because they do not find the suitable work in their residence. And given our social system, given our tabbies and patriarchal system, there is less chance that a girl will leave her native place just for work. And World Bank study has shown that there is a mismatch between women seeking work and women getting work. Now, the small cities can take that advantage. They can have an educated women power, and also women skilled in other ways, like handicrafts and others. They can be utilized in this type of industries. Then coming to the threat, the main threat, of course, if we allow this to go on what we have done till now, if we continue that as business as usual, that we neglect other things and talk about the so-called economic activities, increase in economic activities in the smaller cities and towns, we will forget a very crucial component, that is environment. And ecological vulnerability is there. There are lots of ecosystems and biodiversity in and around the rural areas and others. Now, if we talk about the expansion of urban activities, forgetting the environment, that can be a real threat to the ecosystem, to the settlement system, and so on. We cannot allow the small cities and towns to grow as we have allowed the growth for the metropolitan cities, forgetting all environmental vulnerabilities and others. Now, in India, we don't have a mobility which is now there in Western countries or US, like Western Europe or USA. There, a person is born in one country and he may live in another country. He may get education in another country. He may find a job in another country, and so on. So we don't have that type of mobility in India. We still now we want to live in our native place, or even if we have to migrate, we have to commute, we like to come back to our native place, and that is shown by the return migration data which is found in 2011 census. 11 census. So most of the people who had to migrate in the early 60s or uh, early 60s or 70s in the search of jobs, that is mainly for the case of the education sector, most of them returned back as found in the 2001 and 2011 data. So we are not very mobile. We are not very mobile. So for a balanced development of the country, which one must admit that we don't have that. We have to develop these smaller cities and towns, and the COVID has shown, this corona pandemic has shown that something was not right in the bigger cities and towns. Bigger cities and towns, people have clustered there, people have moved there, people have clustered there in search of job, in search of livelihood, but they were living a life not very uh, attractive for human being. They used to live in places which does not have proper sanitation, proper water supply or anything, but they had to live there because they had no other option. They had no other option. They have left their rural native place or smaller towns and cities because no job was not available there. They had to move. Now, if we can build up an economy based on the small cities and towns, taking these advantages and taking a coup from the COVID pandemic, that this pandemic, that all was not well, this pollution generating manufacturing system was not good, then the smaller cities and towns are in a position to not only help themselves, not only strengthen themselves in terms of financial and other assets. Now, if they have their local resources, and they if can then develop their own financial base, then of course, the people will be in a position to demand better infrastructure and better governance. Better governance. It is a chicken and egg problem, whether good governance, good infrastructure brings in better economic activity. But if there is a good economic base, people will demand infrastructure and governance, and that has been shown in the history of many countries, that people become conscious of their own rights and they demand uh, their amenities, their facilities. They want good governance, and so and so. So I am a bit optimistic. One may think whether this is a bit of wild imagination, but given our system, given our skilled manpower, given our uh, resources, I'm quite optimistic that if we divert our attention, or if we change our direction of growth from this metro based big city based service sector economy to local manufacturing economy, the smaller cities and towns will not only help themselves but also help our country as a whole. So now I end here, and thanks for your patience in hearing.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now the floor is open for questions. Ma'am, I think that was very insightful. Thank you. Thank you so much again. We'll take some questions on the chat.
Will the questions come in the chat?
Yes, ma'am. You can also view it. Yes. Ma'am, I have posted some questions
Yeah.
to you. Yes.
Yes, I found one by Vinay. Now, if you talk about whether urbanization is good and bad, that is a very, very, very normative question. Usually, urbanization is related to is positively related to economic growth and development. There are lots of theories running around uh, about how economic growth leads to urbanization. It's not only a shift from rural to urban, but it also changes your way of life. The sociologists, the political scientists, they are more in a position to talk about the change in lifestyle and others. That is a big question. But the more important question here, what I'm getting from your end is that whether today our big cities like Delhi, Mumbai are also hotspots of corona. So whether what is important is what type of urbanization, we are carrying on. It's as I was saying, we have a very top heavy type of urbanization, and that is because of the type of or the process of development we are engaged with. Now, as I was saying, that the infrastructural development of the smaller cities and towns are continuously neglected. So, with increasing income, with increasing aspiration for better life, people go to or people live in, come to bigger urban areas. Bigger urban areas, so they become more dense, they become more uh, uh, they become more dense, they become more lacking with amenities over time, and we again spend money on bigger cities and towns. So there's a cumulative effect of like that. So our older, smaller cities become they continuously lose their attractiveness, and people come to bigger cities. So that is the type of urbanization we should not allow, or we uh, should not carry on. So that is more important. And there is a question from Vinay Shankar. Vinay wants to know that uh, that is pro-investment policy pushed by the government, uh, and the economic slowdown of the lockdown effect. Now, of course, what the government is doing, I must not say that that is the right thing or that is the best thing. The best thing, whatever the monetary policy declared uh, by the governor of Reserve Bank, or whatever be the fiscal policy uh, declared by our finance ministry, the finance minister itself, all of them are encouraging the so-called economic structure we are having. There is no departure from that structure. But what I am suggesting, it's a departure from that structure for an overall balanced development. So, and of course, there will be economic slowdown. Surely. Uh, just today, I read an article in a newspaper that it will take about 1 year for a country like India to recover. But that is also related to what is happening in the global scenario, what is happening in the world. Now, in a globalized situation, in a liberalized country like ours, our economy is very, very much linked with the global scenario. As we know, our so-called shining service sector, the exporters of service, are mostly related to the countries, mainly USA, Western Europe, and others. They are also suffering from this pandemic. So if there is a slowdown in these countries, that will surely affect our economic situation. So if we still continue with the same economic model, so our slowdown will surely continue. Now, of course, there are predictions about loss of job and other things. Loss of job and many other things. Now, this webinar is not meant for going into all these things. Here, we were mainly discussing the prospects of so-called smaller cities and towns. Now, just replying to Roshni, that yes, hawkers and small sellers of the cities are lying unemployed, and also the so-called not only the small sellers, but also small service providers, very small service providers. As everything is closed, the so-called linkage to this smallest service provider, like the binder in the printing industry, they are also lying unemployed. And I have a very close conversation with the people, the union of the hawkers. Now they are continuously urging the government to open up the hawking. What their demand is to allow 1/3 of their listed hawkers every day. So at least 33% gets a chance. But I think the government is not in a position to open up such things, because it does. If you allow the hawker, it does not mean that the hawker is there alone. People will gather there just for buying, and there is little chance that the so-called social distancing can be maintained, or we can prevent some other things like touching and etc. And with the absurdly low rate of testing, we just don't know who is a carrier and which is an asymptotic carrier. So that will be a very risky proposition. I have every day I have some conversation with the Soccer Federation people, and of course I support their cause, but I think we have to wait for few more days to go for that. Yes, regional planning, especially settlement planning, is very important in this context. And my own suggestion is, this is my personal opinion, I have also advocated it somewhere else, that we should come out of this rural-urban binary and think of settlement planning as a compact, integrated thing. It's not mm, it's not regional planning, it's not planning for rural areas or planning for urban areas. We should go for settlement planning as a whole, because what is rural today will become urban tomorrow. And if we do not take care of all these things, everything will be preempted. Everything will be preempted. There will be no chance of correcting the mistakes. So we should go for settlement planning. We should forget the terms like urban planning and rural planning. This should be settlement planning, and supply of amenities. Now, agglomeration economy is basically because of external economies coming out of activities. Now, if there are activities, there will be agglomeration economies. There is no doubt about it. So talking about NUPF and compact cities, of course, we have to go for compact cities. Compact cities in some way or other. But compact cities does not mean that high rises with gated communities. And that is a very narrow view about compact cities. Compact cities. We have to think about using our land resource very carefully. We have wasted our lands. We have spoiled our ecological advantages. The NUPF 2018 or the so-called national urban policy in making. Last year we had a lot of discussion about the national urban policy and others, the 10 points and so on. Again, I am coming back to the same point that our most crucial resource in this case is land. We have to, if we want to remain as a country with food security, with self-sufficiency in food production, we have to preserve our agricultural land. We cannot allow that to go in the West. But urbanization is increasing. You have to arrange for urban space. You have to arrange urban residential space, commercial space, and everything. So the crucial thing is urban land or land as a whole. So we should start with land use planning for more reasonable use of land. So unbalanced, yes, in a sense, this rural urban going back, coming down is unbalanced in some sense. Is going for, what should I say, that we cannot just turn the wheel in the backward direction. We have to accept that urbanization is there, urbanization will be there, and we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared. And as I was saying, this is a chance to go back to a different paradigm of urban development. As you have rightly pointed out, that bigger cities are hotspot of corona, so we cannot carry on with excessive growth of these big cities. Yes. Now, our problem is, as far as urban development or everything is concerned, we forget to think about the whole, keeping the perspective in mind. When we think of a city, we think of a city. When we think of a small town, we think of a small town. As I elaborated on the linkages and flows, now this determines the economy of an area, and if we can take care of these linkages and flows, there will surely be development of smaller cities and towns, as pointed out by Ali, that somebody, that smaller cities and towns have their chances to grow. It needs an impetus. Maybe an educational institution, maybe a manufacturing hub, maybe, or similar things like that.
I think that's it for the questions. Thank you so much to all the participants who have raised some interesting questions, and ma'am to have answered so patiently. It's a very interesting topic, and I think it will go on for, especially, having a person who is so patiently addressing us throughout, right? So, but we'll definitely see how we can take some questions if possible in future and work on these questions and make sure that there is a follow-up webinar to this particular round. Thank you again for all the questions. We have stopped taking the questions now. I think it's time for us to wind the session and thank ma'am for all the insights she has given. I would request Pia to present the vote of thank you.
Yes, I'd like to begin by thanking ma'am for giving us her perspective on the issue in such a structured manner, starting from a historical perspective, going into the characteristics of urbanization in India, the labor market, and further moving on to the limitations and opportunities for small cities in India to capitalize on given the situation. I would also like to thank ma'am once again for readily accepting our invitation to address us here. To all the participants, we reached a number of more than 60, so thank you so much for coming out in such a huge number and encouraging all of us at City Speaks. It really means a lot. And lastly, I'd like to thank Amrit, our intern for Municipal Finance, for being such a keen participant in the organization of this event, and for inviting ma'am to take part in this webinar and address all of us. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Once again, I think it's a great privilege to have you. I think words are very short, especially for having encouraged young students like us and young entrepreneurs like me. It's a great honor to have you, and I hope we will continue to receive some of the wise words coming from you in the future also. Thank you so much again, ma'am.
Sure. Thank you again.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
For any of the participants, we would like to, take 2 minutes in case you would like to, unmute your microphone and share your experience. We are welcoming you to do that. And in future also, please feel free to contact us to be associated with producing or engaging with small cities. It would mean a lot to us. I think it's time for us to be, active and be involved in civic issues in our surroundings, in our neighborhood, and render our time to do whatever possible at whatever capacity that we can with the little amount of knowledge that we have. So feel free to reach out at any time. City Speaks welcome you to join hands. We need that. Okay. Please feel free to share your words with ma'am, with us.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Roshni Mukherjee here. I'm an ex-student of Calcutta University, and after that also we have been attached to this university for a long time. We had offered training in data analytics for some time to our computer training software, and for a long time people know us very well in your campus, and it was a pleasure actually hearing Mahalaya ma'am after such a long time. So really very enlightening, feeling very grateful that I had got an opportunity after such a long time to be in close contact, to hear ma'am giving lectures, and it's been a privilege kind of thing.
Roshni, it was nice to meet you after a long time.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Me too. I'm Suranjana. I'm an ex-student actually. I passed long time back in 2005. So we have done Mahalaya ma'am's class. So after such a long time, it was a great experience for me too to attend ma'am's classes. And currently, though I am a financial economics person, but I am currently working on this COVID and migrant workers. So actually, it has opened a new avenue of thought for me. So thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. We met recently, no? For your
Yes, ma'am. We
PhD
met
defense.
recently for the PhD interview as well.
PhD defense.
Yeah,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, Aishwarya, we can hear you. Please speak.
Yes. Hi, ma'am. I'm Aishwarya KS. I'm currently pursuing undergraduate in economics from Ethiraj College, Madras University. So I actually have to first of all thank City Speaks and Srilekha ma'am for conducting this wonderful session. It was really good and no words to say, and it's really interesting, I can say, because as in India, a country like India, we tend to concentrate more on the metropolitan cities and all these cities like Chennai, Mumbai, and all the tier one cities. But the now it is actually far more. I understood how smart cities and the planning, everything is important, and it's really good. And yeah, that's all. And also, I must tell that. When I got this core paper, urban economics, I was like, oh, it is a theory paper and stuff. But after joining the City Speaks, and I was somehow relating the concepts, and now it was, it, yeah, that's all.
Hi, this is Arpita. I have also been an ex-student of Calcutta University as well, and my specialization was urban development as well, which ma'am used to take majority of the classes. So listening to ma'am today actually took me back to those days when we used to uh, do classes for urban economics. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, I think if other participants have anything to say, you can. We will wind up in next 2 minutes. Ma'am, all the students of your past students, I guess they have connected with us in huge numbers. And I was so overwhelmed to see the registrations happening. And I think, I mean, as you know, some of the participants mentioned, they are still connected to you, and that's very nice to hear them. And I think they are also overwhelmed to hear you after a long time. So,
Yes,
Amrit,
yes.
so thank you so much for putting this together, connecting ma'am to us, and also the students who have got a chance to listen to her after a long time. It is very you know, inspiring and moving to engage with, you know, someone who has taught us to who we are today and what we are today. So thank you so much, Amrit.
And in this regard, I should also thank Amrit because I got the invitation from his link only. So thank you, Amrit, for this.
Welcome, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am, then I think it's time. Thank you so much. Hope we are connected in the upcoming webinars also.
Yes,
If
yes,
you have,
sure. This is just a beginning.
yes,
This
ma'am.
is just a beginning. Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
So much, ma'am.
Also,
Thank
to
you.
all the participants, if you have any topics that you would be interested to engage with, please do post us, especially with reference to small cities in India and with reference to the East Coast cities, especially from West Bengal to Tamil Nadu. All the cities are interest areas. That is where we are focusing our work on. So it would be nice to have you posting topics which we can engage in future. Thank you all. Thank you once again. I am Srilekha. I would like to sign off. Please feel free to end the call. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am, once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.